Welcome back to the panel discussion, Women of Washington, Digital Workforce, sponsored by Booz Allen Hamilton on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. My guests today are Renee Wynn, CIO NASA, Dorothy Aronson, CIO National Science Foundation, Vicki Hildebrand, CIO Department of Transportation, Dr. Kelly Fletcher, Acting CIO Department of Navy, and Julie McPherson, Senior Vice President, Booz Allen. I'm your moderator, Gigi Schumm. So we're going to continue our discussion about a digital workforce, and in this segment talk a lot about how your agencies are attracting people with the right skill set. Again, I'm going to set a little context here for you. A study of federal leaders conducted last year by the National Academy of Public Administration and ICF International found that over half of those asked, and these are federal employees that they're asking, believe they are not keeping up with innovation in the private sector. The answers weren't surprising: lack of sufficient budgets, security concerns, slow acquisition procedures, some of the things that we talked about last segment. But a third of the respondents also cited lack of employees with current digital skills as a reason. The article goes on to say the government is competing for tech talent using hiring and pay processes that were designed in the 50s for a workforce that was mostly clerical. So again and again, I hear when I talk to people in the federal government, and I heard it in segment one, that one of the best tools that the government has for recruiting is their mission. So I'd be really interested to hear how you're using that mission to attract new talent. And Renee, I'm not going to start with you because you play the NASA card. So instead, Kelly, I'll go down to you at Department of Navy.
Yeah, so I think in the cyber and IT space, there are things that we're doing in Department of Defense that you can't do anywhere else. Full stop. I think there's no argument about that. And we have contractors doing some of those activities, but some of the activities are actually limited to government folks. So I think that's a big draw for us. One thing we're also doing is we're using direct hire authority. So that allows us to hire people not through our regular hiring channels. It's actually how I joined the federal government. And I think it's a great opportunity for folks who want to be involved. They can get hired through, job fairs, through a variety of ways. It's not, going to usajobs.com.
And Vicki, how about at Department of Transportation?
Well, I'm still learning about our processes, but if you think about the Department of Transportation, it's an agency or department that a lot of people know about, right? There are a lot of drivers on the road. Everyone has to go to a DOT. The Federal Aviation Administration is very visible to people. And the Secretary's vision is to be the safest, most modern transportation economy in the world. So we're trying to use that mission to reach out to people in the private sector and really get them excited about moving the department forward. So that's one of the things that we're doing.
So are you working on any innovative projects? We hear things about self-driving cars, and you always hear about that with, in respect to the private sector. What's Department of Transportation doing with some of these leading edge kind of transportation technologies?
We are in the thick of it. We just had a big meeting a couple of days ago around automated vehicles, and we had private sector people, and we had governments and cities in. And it's very exciting what's happening with automated vehicles, bimodal, not just cars, semis, buses, and trains. I mean, it's really anything that moves on surface or water. And then the other thing, of course, which we're all hearing about is drones. Right? We've got a lot going on with drones. And this is a reason I want to get some of the money out of some of the legacy and back-end services so that we can do this kind of innovation.
Those certainly seem like interesting areas that, maybe a millennial would want to work on.
Absolutely.
Okay, Renee.
All right, so I want to add to what Vicki's doing at Department of Transportation, because I want to remind folks about the really cool things the United States government gets to do. So what's going on in partnership right now, private sector with the federal government, is thinking about urban transportation. I am a major Amazon Prime user. I cannot wait until that package is coming and going by drone. Think of the traffic issues we now will be facing in an urban environment if my packages and my pizza and I am being delivered by the drone. We have now gone from a terra firma platform associated with traffic management Air traffic management has always been separated, and the two will come together in an urban environment, I hope, in my lifetime. And so we have to, as a federal government, jump in front of this, and so that your next Google map will take a look at how could I get from place to place by terra firma, by air, or something in between that we're going to have to call that. The other piece associated with that is we've relied on cars to stay on the ground and airplanes to stay in their airspace. Now they're going to be flying above our buildings at floor 6 and 7. What information are they going to be seeing that have been protected by gates that are no longer protected by our windows and that? And so it really changes how we keep appropriate secrets, how we maintain private information, and we've got to be thinking about this stuff now. So if you want to work on really cool stuff, definitely want to go to Department of Transportation, because they're taking a look at this stuff now.
We have an opening for you. Are you available?
I just think it's so cool to get to work on that and imagine, and you go to your whiteboard or chalkboard, whatever it is nowadays, and you get to do it, but you're working with the private sector in this one, because that's where the economy piece is really going to change.
So we really can't talk about hiring without talking about the question of diversity. This is a Women of Washington show, and we're an all-woman panel, which is wonderful. But you know, one of the challenges I think that exists if we don't embrace diversity in our organization is that we're only drawing from half the population, if we're talking about gender diversity, half the population when we're trying to hire. Yet at the same time, it can be a little bit of a double-edged sword if that you've got an opening and it's a critical opening and you're trying to get it filled, and you're having to worry about diversity in the organization and quotas and things like that. So, Julie, let me come to you. I mean, what do you see in terms of the way that diversity intersects with hiring for these critical new skill sets?
So I think that, first of all, we're so committed to diversity. We just kicked off our Digital Women Leaders Network across the firm last week, and it's awesome to see so many people come together who are passionate, women and men, right, and understanding the value proposition of a diverse workforce. The thing that I've found most important is not to deal with diversity at the line of scrimmage, right? When you're thinking about quotas, when you're making decisions, I don't think anybody ends up feeling good at the end of the day, right? So for us, it's as much about thinking about it in the pipeline and making sure that you've got the right people at the right levels all the way through your organization, both in hiring, but also in promotions and in giving them opportunities. And so taking a really end-to-end view of what your profile is and making sure you're thinking about it has been, I think, the biggest benefit we've seen when we think about making sure diversity is part of our decision-making process.
Well, and you wouldn't know it from this brilliant panel, but it's hard when you're talking about STEM jobs, because if you look at the numbers of females and minorities in STEM who've got STEM education, the numbers aren't great. So, Dorothy, the National Science Foundation, what are you doing to recruit a diverse workforce?
STEM is a subject area that the National Science Foundation really focuses on. But apart from that, because we're we're not a research branch of the organization, I think that I don't think of women as the part of the workforce that's not included at this point. Do you guys? But I actually think.
Well, I'll jump in, right? Not on this panel for sure. Again, but if you look across the board at numbers, particularly as you increase levels in an organization and go up into higher and higher into management and this is private sector obviously as well as public sector, all the way up to board seats. I mean, there definitely is. A disparity there.
I believe you, although, again, it's not true at the National Science Foundation. We're led by women, but I understand, for me, diversity is not about sex or, it's about everything. Mm-hmm. It's including vets, it's including people that you don't recognize or understand. You don't recognize the value of each individual unless you consider their differences. You're blind. It's almost like people are speaking different languages when they come from different backgrounds. And the problem I'm having is not with diversity, it's making sure that we're inclusive and making sure that you do hire people that are different than you. which is why I guess the female issue doesn't affect me. What affects me is making sure that all the other people that where you don't recognize their value, their contribution, because they're not speaking to you in a way that resonates with you. I came into the workforce, in the 80s when there was a glass ceiling. Women couldn't advance. I just don't sense that anymore. So, the world keeps changing, but there's a ceiling for someone. And I'm always trying to figure out who it is that we're excluding now.
So Kelly, how about you at the Department of Navy? How are you dealing with diverse hiring and attracting all, to Dorothy's points, all kinds of people?
Yeah, so I actually really agree with Dorothy. I like the way that you framed that. Because when I look for diversity, it's not gender specific, absolutely. It's for us, what we're doing right now with our IT workforce is we've taken away the requirement for certain credentials. We've said, we're really interested in your experience, whether that's military experience, professional experience. We're interested in your education. We want to be confident that you can achieve that credential, but you don't need to have it walking in the door. And I think that's really broadened the scope of the people that we can hire. So I want to go to places that we don't normally look to hire. So for the Department of the Navy, we frequently do hire vets, and I think that's great. But I think that shouldn't be the only people we hire, right? Because then again, we're an echo chamber, and I think that's kind of what you described.
So let's talk about creative approaches to attracting new talent. Are any of you experiencing a different way of recruiting, maybe the early stage workforce, maybe some of these digital natives?
I could tell a story, a couple of things that we're doing differently. One is we created a program that is focused on university students, and we call it our Summer Games program. So we put together challenges, and we form teams that are diverse in nature, and they actually go through a 16-week experience where they're problem solving. And we crowdsource some of the hardest problems that our clients are facing across the missions, and then we form teams against them. And they go through this curriculum where they're actually problem solving, interviewing, prototyping, building, and then at the end they're competing for prizes. And I say that because that is a very interesting way to differentiate your talent. One, you get to see what they bring to the table. They get to experience what you offer them. And when they go back to their colleges, right, they talk about the amazing things that they spent their summer doing with us. So that's been something that's been exciting for me inside the organization and has really helped us show up differently in the marketplace.
I think the federal government has to get more creative about how it recruits. I haven't seen anything like this, but this is a fabulous idea.
We could do it.
It's a fabulous idea because young people today are thinking about their careers differently, and their expectations for a job are different than they were when I entered the workforce. And I think we have to get a little bit more creative about how we reach out to them and what we offer them. There's got to be some flexibility. I have 2 millennials of my own, and one of them, actually they're both in the world of technology, and one of them just assumes he's going to go hike a mountain in the morning and then go to work in the afternoon. And he's a terrific contributor, but his company allows him to do that.
Well, Vicki, I think that's a great point, right? I asked the question about attracting talent, but attracting is half the battle. It's as important that the workforce that you, or the environment that you create is a good fit for the millennials and what they're looking for too, and whether that be maybe some different work hours or a different way of interacting with colleagues. Renee, what are you seeing? I'm sure you hire lots of millennials at NASA.
Yes, NASA is doing, I think, very well when it comes to recruiting for different folks. We had the largest application pool that we had, 18,300 for our recently announced astronaut class, and they come from a number of different both backgrounds, as well as we had some folks that have served in the military as well. And we look at our astronaut cadre right now. They are very, very diverse in terms of their disciplines, how they approach problem solving, their backgrounds and everything like that. So at NASA, one of the things we try to do is definitely get out there. Our brand is pretty well known with that, and also each of us as NASA employees really are an arm of our public face, public service face. For me, I'm handing out NASA pins and patches and stickers on a regular basis to invite children to think about science, the STEAM. Actually, I look at it as STEAM, and arts and design is also part of that, because robotics now are interfacing with humans. The way robotics were 10 years ago, they didn't have as much of an interface, and for NASA, that's a safety issue. And we do have a robot on board of space station from the Japanese Space Agency, and that interaction has to be designed as humans interact, and the robots are moving that direction. But that's how we look at it, is we have a responsibility to make sure that the great business of NASA is known, and we also share that when we're out in the public. We do a lot of contests, space tech. I do some Datanauts. It's how to use data from NASA and so we're always out engaging with the public to ensure that we've sparked the imagination to the next generation.
I'm your moderator, Gigi Schumm, on the panel discussion, Women of Washington Digital Workforce, sponsored by Booz Allen Hamilton on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.